Headquarters, and good morning, and welcome to Admin Operations Commemorative Day, commemorating D-Day, which actually took place on June 6, 1944. The eyes of the world will be upon you, Dwight Eisenhower said. On June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare took place. It used over 5,000 ships, landed more than 150,000 men on 5 beaches in Normandy. The landing marked the start of a long and costly campaign in Northwest Europe, which ultimately convinced the Germans to surrender. Dwight Eisenhower said famously, "The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people march with you. The tide is turned. The free men of the world are marching together in victory." Now, just a few statistics about what happened on D-Day and what was used. Almost 12,000 aircraft, almost 15,000 sorties and flights flown, over 6,000 sea vessels used for the landing, 156,000 troops moved, 10,250 casualties from Allied forces, 4,000 to 9,000 German casualties. And this is massive destruction. Some facts about D-Day. Codenamed Operation Overlord, it commenced on June 6, 1944. Overlord opened the long-awaiting Second Front against Germany. It was the largest naval, air, and land operations in history and still remains to be that to this day. D-Day was an international effort. We had about 1,000 Canadians actually died on D-Day on those 5 beaches. Northwest Europe was the most significant campaign fought by the Western Allies. And of course, some people may not know, but there were many D-Days in World War II. This is famously called D-Day, but D-Day was the name given to Deployment Day, Operation Day. In fact, when D-Day was happening on June 6th, there were several D-Days happening on the other side of the globe in the Pacific, with the Okinawa campaigns and the Marines and the Army fighting up through Peleliu and the Philippines.
The D-Day landings in less than 60 seconds. D-Day was the first day of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Western Europe. The target was Normandy, but with a deception operation in the Pas-de-Calais. First, 3 airborne divisions flew in to secure the flanks. Their landings were scattered, but most objectives were achieved. Next, Allied aircraft and warships pummeled the beach defences with a huge bombardment, and then American troops landed on Utah and Omaha beaches. Utah was a great success, but Omaha became a bloodbath thanks to a failed bombardment, sunken amphibious tanks, plus difficult terrain. An hour after that, British and Canadian forces landed on Gold, Juno and Sword beaches. There was tough fighting for some German strongholds, but on the whole these landings were successful. Then in the afternoon, the Germans counterattacked, but thanks to poor command decisions and huge Allied firepower, they were beaten back with heavy losses. Despite failing to take all their objectives, by the end of the day, 156,000 Allied troops were ashore, and Operation Overlord was off to a strong start.
D-Day in 60 seconds. Now that you got the facts, I thought I would do something a little bit different and share some experiences from letters that were written by service members after D-Day. One is, news on the 90th has been released. Maybe you know something now of what the boys have been going through. Constant contact with the enemy since D-Day. They've taken their losses too. Somebody says, "Old Bill got it today." "No," you say, "son of a bitch." And you go on about your business with a little more emptiness inside, a little more tiredness, and a little more hatred for everything concerning war. Another, "These men are loved with the kind of love that exists no place but on the battlefield, and it's never talked about. These gents go for days without sleep, give away their clothes, go without food, keep going when they're sick, perform miraculous feats when they are wounded, and take suicidal details rather than ask someone else to do it. They're never afraid, they're never cold, they never complain, and they spend all their time trying to think of ways to help their men and to save them. I don't know if they're happy, but if it isn't selflessness, I never hope to see it." Another letter written home. by Charles McAllister, 101st Airborne, wrote to the mother of his cousin, Jim Dashner. Jim's section leader had been killed, and Jim was in charge, so he took over the machine gun himself. The enemy had them surrounded on 3 sides and had pinned them down with fire. Jim took the machine gun and crawled forward to a good position and set up the gun and began firing. He was in a spot and was doing plenty of good, so the Germans started concentrating all their efforts on him. His platoon leader saw they were getting close to him and yelled to Jim, "And you better get out of there." The boys in his platoon said it was possible that Jim didn't hear, as they'd never known him to refuse to obey an order before. But his friends seemed to think he was just mad and was going at it with so much good, he didn't want to move. So he stayed right there and fired until his gun was red hot. Then they got zeroed in on him and landed a mortar shell right on top of him. He died instantly, but his hand was still clutching the trigger. As a result of his continued fire, the platoon was able to advance on their objective. With all my love, Charles. In a lot of these commemorations and memorials, we don't really hear the side from those personal accounts. And I think it's important to remember those. Something I threw in this is just a few years ago, we had 226,000 of these heroes still with us. Today, we have less than 50,000. In 2029, we'll have less than 10,000. So, cherish these heroes while they're still here. Listen to them, remember them. I'll share next. Has anybody ever heard of Ernie Pyle? He was an older war correspondent in World War II, and he penned several articles. And I found this article, and it was pretty. I'd never heard of it, and I wanted to share it because back when this was written and put out, it was considered a poetic war article.
Normandy Beachhead, June 16th, 1944. I took a walk along the historic coast of Normandy in the country of France. It was a lovely day for strolling along the seashore. Men were sleeping on the sand, some of them sleeping forever. Men were floating in the water, but they didn't know they were in the water, for they were dead. The water was full of squishy little jellyfish about the size of your hand, millions of them. In the center, each of them had a green design exactly like a 4-leaf clover, the good luck emblem. Sure. Hell yes. I walked for 1.5 miles along the water's edge of our many-miled invasion beach. You wanted to walk slowly, for the detail on that beach was infinite. The wreckage was vast and startling. The awful waste and destruction of war, even aside from the loss of human life, has always been one of its outstanding features to those who are in it. Anything and everything is expendable, and we did expend on our beachhead in Normandy during those first few hours. For 1 mile out from the beach, there were scores of tanks and trucks and boats that you could no longer see, for they were at the bottom of the water, swamped by overloading, or hit by shells, or sunk by mines. Most of their crews were lost. You could see trucks tipped over and swamped. You could see partly sunken barges and the angled-up corners of jeeps and small landing craft half submerged. And at low tide, you could still see those vicious 6-pronged iron snares that helped snag and wreck them. On the beach itself, high and dry, were all kinds of wrecked vehicles. There were tanks that had only just made the beach before being knocked out. There were jeeps that had been burned to a dull gray. There were big derricks on caterpillar treads that didn't quite make it. There were half-tracks carrying office equipment that had been made into a shambles by a single shell hit, their interiors still holding their useless equipage of smashed typewriters, telephones, office files. There were LCTs turned completely upside down and lying on their backs, and how they got that way, I don't know. There were boats stacked on top of each other, their sides caved in, their suspension doors knocked off. In this shoreline museum of carnage, there were abandoned rolls of barbed wire and smashed bulldozers and big stacks of thrown-away life belts and piles of shells still waiting to be moved. In the water floated empty life rafts and soldiers' packs and ration boxes, and mysterious oranges. On the beach lay snarled rolls of telephone wire and big rolls of steel matting and stacks of broken, rusting rifles. On the beach lay expended, sufficient men and mechanism for a small war. They were gone forever now, and yet we could afford it. We could afford it because we were on. We had our toehold, and behind us there were such enormous replacements for this wreckage on the beach that you could hardly conceive of their sum total. Men and equipment were flowing from England in such a gigantic stream that it made the waste on the beachhead seem like nothing at all, really nothing at all. A few hundred yards back on the beach is a high bluff. Up there we had a tent hospital and a barbed wire enclosure for prisoners of war. From up there you could see far up and down the beach in a spectacular crow's nest view and far out to sea. And standing out there on the water beyond all this wreckage was the greatest armada man has ever seen. You simply could not believe the gigantic collection of ships that lay out there waiting to unload. Looking from the bluff, it lay thick and clear to the far horizon of the sea and beyond, and it spread out to the sides and was miles wide. Its utter enormity would move the hardest man. As I stood up there, I noticed a group of freshly taken German prisoners standing nearby. They had not yet been put in the prison cage. They were just standing there, a couple of doughboys leisurely guarding them with Tommy guns. The prisoners, too, were looking out to sea, the same bit of sea that for months and years had been so safely empty before their gaze. Now they stood staring, almost as if in a trance. They didn't say a word to each other. They didn't need to. The expression on their faces was something forever unforgettable. In it was the final horrified acceptance of their doom. If only all Germans could have had the rich experience of standing on the bluff and looking out across the water and seeing what their compatriots saw.
Thanks. I know that was a few minutes long, but I'd not heard that and read about it, and thought it was good to share with you. That really concludes the commemoration portion. I'd like to take a moment of silence and just remember those that served, those that did not come back from D-Day. Thank you. Now, there's one other portion of the presentation that's left, but I'll let you know. It's a scene that I pulled out of Saving Private Ryan. If you've never seen it, it's probably one of the most gripping, gnarly depictions of what it must have been like that day on Omaha Beach. And I'll let you guys determine whether you want to watch it or not. It's about 9 minutes long, but we can let it play. We've got a great spread of morning snacks for you, thanks to Susan and Tammy. That's back there, so if you don't want to watch that, or you guys can move freely around, it'll just play. But be advised, it's graphic. Yeah, that's the opening scene in Saving Private Ryan. The movie's several years old, but yeah, I know it's not a very uplifting piece, but I think it's important to remember the sacrifice that soldiers make in these crucial times of pinnacle parts of wars. D-Day certainly was one of those times. So, well, thank you, everybody, and thanks to Susan and Tammy. We've got a great spread back there. Please get something to eat. There's fruit back there and some juice, and we'll get the lights back on and have a good Thursday. Thank you for remembering these heroes, and we'll see you next commemorative date.